Episode 97, Fired Coaches Podcast. We have Andrew Wingreen on the podcast with us. He is the head coach currently at the New College of Florida NAIA program, which he just actually kicked off a few years ago from scratch. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into that with him. We coached against each other years ago when he was an assistant in Northern Athletics Collegiate Conference when he was at Rockford. Got his start, honestly, as a young student assistant at his alma mater, which we'll touch on. He's been Division I, a lot of different levels, and has a lot of different experiences. Written a book called Win 1-1, which I just recently finished up, which I thought was a great read. So we'll talk on that. Does some leadership speakings, work camps all over. Andrew, anything I'm missing from the bio here?
Man, I'm sure you missed some stuff because there's a lot in there, but you did a great job covering the highlights. And man, I'm really excited to be on the podcast with you today and excited to talk.
Yeah, I guess let's work a little bit where you're at right now. So obviously New College of Florida, like I said, NAIA program, you took that over. I think it was 23-24 was your first season, or at least when you started there. What was that like kind of building that program from scratch? If I read correctly that you didn't have any facilities or anything like that. So, what was that kind of like taking that opportunity? Obviously a head coaching job is great, but obviously all the challenges that come with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. It's still been a whirlwind going into year 4 this season. But yeah, when I took the job in 2023, I had just been an assistant on staff at Stetson University and had been in Florida for several years. And when I saw the job posting, New College of Florida, I was like, I've never heard of this school. I don't know where it's at. I don't know anything about it. And so, I did a little digging, obviously seeing they were going to be joining the Sun Conference and the NAIA. So it was, piqued my interest and reached out and was able to, get in touch with the AD. And once I started learning a lot about the school and a lot of the changes and, things that were going on, it was one of those decisions where I looked at my wife and was like, man, do we really want to take this on? Is this something that, that we feel God's calling us to? And ultimately, we took that leap. But yeah, we took the job in, May of 2023. Had to recruit a roster from scratch, had to, set up schedule from scratch. I think we played 25 of our 28 games on the road that first season.
And was that first season the 23-24 season?
Yeah. So they had never had athletics at the school before. They started the entire athletics program from scratch. And so it was a new thing for everybody, everybody on campus, all the coaches were new and we were kind of in it together. But yeah, just trying to figuring out, obviously for college basketball, there's certain, size courts and regulations, dimensions we need to play on. And there were only a few places in our area that could accommodate our needs. So just God worked it out perfectly to find the right spot, find the right people, find the right schedule. And, it was crazy doing it, but we launched it. And I think our goal going in was just lay a solid foundation, make sure we get the right people to build this thing and let's see where it goes. And we did that. And now we see the fruits of it starting to take root and, starting to take off.
Yeah. I think the first year, you went from like 7 games won to 14 games won. Quite a jump that you had there from the first season to the second season. What did you learn most about yourself in building that? Like you said, you're like, hey, do we want to take this challenge on as a family and, take this opportunity? Obviously, there's a lot of exciting things that can be with a brand new program from scratch. And there's a lot of things that are problems that people would never understand doing that. So, what have you learned in the few years that you've been the head coach there, just kind of taking that over?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different than anything I've experienced before. I think when you're coaching, you're a competitor, you want to win games. And I think going into it, we knew it was going to be tough, right? We knew it was going to be an uphill battle, just trying to win as fast as we wanted to. But I think I learned, it's one of my mentors, Richie McKay, who's the head coach at Liberty. He told me, make sure when you're recruiting your first roster, when you're recruiting your guys, you find guys you can lose with. And that, that was one of those things that kind of struck me like, what, why would I want dudes I can lose with? But there's talent, there's athleticism, you got guys with skill, and there's plenty of people you can win with, right? When things are going well, everybody has a good attitude, everybody puts on the good face, they're selfless, and it's easy. But, building a program's hard. No facility, you're trying to figure it out, everyone's new, and when you lose, you got to have guys who can bounce back. You got to have guys who can stay connected. You got to have guys who are in it for a bigger purpose and a bigger reason than just the final outcome, and I think we all kind of embrace the mentality of, hey, you don't get a chance to do this very often. I mean, how many people have had the chance to be part of something from the very beginning? It's not for everyone. There's not a lot of those opportunities. So we kind of rallied around that and just, hey, we're going to take our lumps, but man, you get to look back 10, 15, 20 years from now and say, like, I was a part of starting that program and we laid that foundation at a high level. And so that was something that you just kind of learn to lead through adversity, lead through, difficult circumstances, lead through not having everything that you need, and understanding that it is enough, and it's just the mentality you approach it with.
Well, and the opportunity to lead your own program, right? Like obviously you've
Yeah.
done that before, but there's only so many opportunities regardless of level. And you still got to stay in Florida, which is probably pretty cool too, being a snowbird from Burlington, Wisconsin, and spending time up in the northern parts of Wisconsin for your college career and things like that. So, I guess going back to, the original days at Northland International, being a student assistant, what was that like getting in at the student level? How much responsibility did you have? And, what was kind of that growth pattern for you over those few years when you were a student assistant?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, those years when I was in college were some of the best years where I showed a lot of growth, right? For people who don't know, like I had a heart disease. I have a heart disease, and I played through high school, but I wasn't cleared to play in college. And so just going into that opportunity, I already kind of had this bitterness in my heart, right? Like, this isn't what I want to do. I want to be out on the court. I want to play. Like, man, why'd you put this in my life, God? This sucks. I hate this. And so I was not going into my college years with the right mentality. I had a lot of stuff weighing on me, but I had two coaches at Northland who really kind of took me under their wing, and they helped me see something from a different perspective, to kind of frame my circumstances differently, and ultimately, how I could use the game from a different perspective and through coaching. And so, God really took a hold of that, gave me the opportunity with the men's basketball team to, take a student assistant role. And for me, it was, I was so thankful because at a small school, it wasn't me just being a manager. It was, man, I'm out on the road recruiting. I'm out on the road scouting. I'm doing all these, all these different coaching roles as a freshman, sophomore, junior in college, and just kind of, got my feet wet with that. I saw all my aunts, all my uncles coach high school basketball, but just kind of getting to experience it, I started kind of shifting, my mindset, and hey, like, this is something I love to do, and I see how it's impacted my life. And man, I want to go find a way to impact 18 to 22-year-olds every day of my life, because I saw how big and influential that was in my life. So yeah, it was a great experience, really thankful for it. And that was the beginning of a 15 plus year journey in college coaching.
Yeah. I love how you talked about, your head wasn't in the right space, and obviously, right, nobody would be getting that news that you can't play after, playing in high school and things like that. But, I loved in your book, the next play mentality, which I think, I've always been a big fan of, because I struggle with that as a player, letting the negative play go and worry about the next one when you're still hung up on it. And, being at Northland International, for people who aren't aware, I mean, that you were northwest of Green Bay, just short of the UP. You talk about recruiting, like what were you doing for recruiting events and being on the road and stuff like that, finding kids and trying to get them to Northland International?
Yeah, well, it wasn't easy. A lot of it was, it was a Christian school. So we really, hit hard on kind of the schools and, private schools that were, churches that had sent kids there. And, we relied heavily on that because, yeah, we were in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're an hour north of Green Bay. We're 45 minutes from Iron Mountain, Michigan, where the nearest Walmart was. There was more deer than people in that area. And so, the snow, the temperatures, all of it, it's hard to get kids up there. But I think it was just
But also a great, in a flipped way though, in terms of being a coach, right? Like great experience, because it's like, I don't know how many more challenging things I'll have like this, right? And obviously you've taken on some challenge projects, which I'm leading to believe that having that experience early on, it's just kind of like another notch in the belt, right? Like, hey, I've done this already.
100%. I think, obviously at the time I was just having fun, right? I had no idea the things I was learning. I mean, I was so young and just, hey, let's go. But I tell coaches that all the time. Like, you may not be in the position you want to be in, or you might not even realize all the things you're able to do, how it's going to impact you down the road. But yeah, I mean, I look back on, my time at Northland, my time at Rockford, my time at Bob Jones. And as I'm growing and as I'm learning these things along the way, just how to deal with problems, administrative things, how do I organize spreadsheets, whatever it is, how much am I using that now as a head coach? And how much have I used some of those mistakes and failures that I had as a young coach, that I can think back specifically to some of those things and be like, man, I'm so glad that happened, because now I'm not going to handle it the same way, and I'm going to be better and help this person in a different way than I would have back then. So yeah, amazing experience, and really, really grateful for it.
So what was Rockford like? Obviously we had coached against each other, not knowing that at the time, 2011, 12, you getting away from Northern International, right? Like that's the experience you knew, you were a student assistant, now you're out of college and you're at Rockford. Talk about just kind of those responsibilities and obviously, moving to Rockford and just taking on that challenge.
Yeah, there's actually one little piece in between Northland and Rockford. We had gotten married. Me and my wife got married, and we actually moved down to Orlando, Florida for a few months. I was planning on taking the graduate assistant spot at UCF, and then that fell through. Some things happened with our families and back home, and we just made the decision to move back. And my wife is from Rockford, so we're like, hey, let's go be back by family. And so talked to Coach Rebsam at the time at Rockford, and was willing to give me a volunteer position, which I was grateful for. But with that volunteer position, I was working at Hobby Lobby part-time on State Street in Rockford, and I was also selling used cars at Lou Backroad Chevrolet. So, it's crazy, right? The things we'll do because coaching, the things that we love to do just to make an impact on people and be around the game, there's not always great money. And so we made that sacrifice. But yeah, Rockford, again, I'm learning. At the time, that was the highest level of basketball I had been a part of at a Division III school, and loved that conference. Right, I thought so highly of it. Got to go back into these small colleges in Wisconsin, and got to coach in front of several of my friends and family, and I thought it was great. And again, just learned, right? Like you're driving the vans everywhere, you're driving the buses, and back then too, Rockford, not the easiest place to recruit to. Didn't have the best facilities, didn't have the all the bells and whistles, but you just learn how to build relationships and how important the people are when it comes to a program. Because at the end of the day, like the facilities, the location, like that stuff's great and it helps, but like people matter, and the way you treat people, the way you interact with people, the way you can go through seasons together. I mean, that's truly how you build programs. And so I started learning that a lot more, kind of getting into that Rockford situation, and set me up for my first full-time job when I ultimately went to Bob Jones.
Yeah, and Coach Weber, Andrew Weber, was on our podcast. I think number 4 he might have been. Obviously, I've known him a long time when he was at Rockford too. And like you said, again, doesn't matter, right? Division III, when you're in an enrollment-driven Division III, everyone's got some type of issue, right? Whether it's your facility, whether it's your academic offerings, scholarships, whatever, right? I mean, in terms of, academic aid and all that stuff. So talk about Bob Jones being full-time. You were there 5 years, obviously involved with pretty much everything, right? Recruiting, player development, directing camps, all that different types of stuff. Down south. Talk about taking that opportunity down in South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it was also, I was so resistant to go to Bob Jones. I had heard these stories about Bob Jones, like how crazy it was there and all the rules, and I was just like, man, I don't want to go there. I do not want to be a part of that. I don't want anything to do with it. But again, God works in funny ways, and I ended up, the guy who took the athletic director job at Bob Jones, he's a guy named Neil Ring. He was the head coach at Maranatha Baptist Bible College for a little bit, and so he was the AD and the head basketball coach out at Bob Jones, and wanted to bring me over there. And I was like, no, I'm not coming with you. I'm going to stay. I'm going to do something else. But we went to a Final Four in New Orleans, and I remember I stayed at I was staying with Coach Ring at a La Quinta Suites or a La Quinta Inn, and he was like selling me on the program, like trying to get me down there. And one of my friends, Wayne Simeon, who played at the University of Kansas, Kansas was in the Final Four that year, and he said, "Hey Andrew, like I need someone to stay with at the team hotel where Kansas was." And I told Coach Ring, I said, "Peace out. I'm going to stay with Wayne. Like, thanks, but no thanks to this job. I'm out." And I left, and I went and stayed. I stayed with Wayne at the hotel. And it was just maybe a week or two later where I just kept feeling like, man, maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. Like maybe I'm supposed to go to South Carolina. And it started feeling like God was kind of putting that in front of us. And, some of the other opportunity I was looking at, we started to close those doors. And so we ultimately made our way out to Bob Jones. And kind of a full circle moment too is, at the time, Bob Jones was starting their athletics program from scratch, right? So, I mean, I've had to do that at New College. Little did I know, man, I was an assistant, but we're building this athletic program from scratch, doing the same thing we had to do that I've had to do at New College. And I'm learning, right? I'm learning what to do, what not to do, how to navigate the waters, how to recruit kids from an intramural team, how to set everything up. And so I think that was really cool that, I had that opportunity to to go through that once before in my coaching career. Because again, like I said, not many people get to do that one time. I've gotten to be part of it twice, building a program from scratch. So we spent 5 years at Bob Jones. Again, learned a lot, learned a ton. And then our head coach was stepping down as the head coach, and he was just going to assume the athletic director position. So I was interviewing for the head coaching position, and kind of through that situation is when we ended up getting moved on at Bob Jones, and that's a fun story there too.
So what all happened there then? I mean, in terms of you, obviously you end up pivoting and going to Bethel in Indiana, very well-known NAIA program, but, kind of going through that process and obviously, having to leave Bob Jones on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had known kind of early on in the season, probably November or so, that, our head coach was going to be stepping down and just being the AD, and we were planning on me kind of taking over, right? And so I had went through the interview process with him and the committee and the president. We went through everything, and I thought everything was going really, really well. Was enjoying everybody. I knew people, had great relationships at Bob Jones, but kind of like I referenced before, there's some rules at Bob Jones, and we had been attending a church. We'd been attending a church at Bob Jones that I guess we weren't supposed to be attending, which I know kind of sounds crazy for a lot of people, but when they found out that we were attending this church, they said, we just don't feel like we can hire you as the head basketball coach, just in that type of position. And so, but I didn't know that at the time. I had a meeting at a Starbucks with our AD, and I went into that meeting thinking he's going to offer me the job. Here we go. Let's roll with it. But instead he said, hey, here's why we're not able to hire you. And my position was going to be the head coach, but they weren't going to have another full-time assistant. So basically my position became the head coach position, and I didn't have an opportunity to be the assistant coach. And so I went in about, the span of 20 minutes thinking I'm getting the job, to getting back in my car and crying. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, I got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. I got a wife at home, and, we weren't making that much money in the first place, but that was the first time I've ever had to deal with any financial adversity whatsoever, but it was just totally blindsided.
Yeah, literally. I mean, I'm thinking you go into that with all of a plan of how you're going to attack and take this program over and do things how you want to do it, right? And all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, complete opposite. So, I mean, how do you bounce back from that? Like, how do you, again, like you mentioned before, you're at Rockford and you're figuring out ways to make money and stay in it, but going through your head and talking about next play mentality, like what was that for you at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you don't really have a whole lot of time to sulk, and you got to go figure things out, right? And so thankfully I was, I feel like I've always networked pretty good, and I have a lot of great relationships in coaching. So I just started kind of leaning on some of those people and seeing what opportunities would be there. And I felt really confident, right, through some of that an opportunity would open up. I didn't know what it was, but I started kind of feeling that confidence, like, okay, we got some time here. Let's work through it. At the time, we were renting a house in Greenville, and the house we were renting from was a high school coach in Georgia, and his parents had coached or had taught at Bob Jones, so he had lived there. And anyways, so we had known him, basketball guy, love him to death. But lo and behold, he's the guy that they hired to be the head coach at Bob Jones, Burton Uaro. And he just left Bob Jones last 2 years ago. But when they moved back, they wanted to be in that house. That was, so we, not only did we lose the job, but then it was like, oh, and by the way, you got to get out of the house too. And I understand it, but it was like, oh my gosh. When
does it stop, right? Like, well, layering things on.
Yeah, I can't even stay here and figure this out. So we actually moved back to Rockford with my wife's family, lived with them for about a month. And we attended a marriage retreat in Georgia with a ministry called Nations of Coaches. They do a lot of character coaching with a ton of college basketball programs around the country. And one of my former coaches at Northland worked for Nations of Coaches. So we're at this marriage retreat, and while at the marriage retreat, we're praying okay, God, what do you got for us? What's next? And we met someone named Mike Lightfoot. All right. And I didn't know the Lightfoots. I'd heard of Bethel College at the time, knew they were good, obviously saw all the success that they had, but Mike had just retired and his son Ryan took over at Bethel. And so it was just one of those, kind of divine encounters where we all this happens. We go to this marriage retreat last minute. We connect with Mike and Jackie Lightfoot, and they connect us with their son Ryan. And through that connection and through that time was how I ended up at Bethel. And so it couldn't have been, more of a God moment, and not just getting me a job, but putting me around people at a program that was so elite, right? I mean, Bethel, so many national championships, historic, just you had Homer Drew, you got legendary coaches, you got legendary program. And so I got to be around some amazing people, again, build great relationships, and got to spend a year there during, Ryan's first year as a head coach as well. So it was really cool to see how all of that worked out.
Yeah, and you go to the NAIA tournament, 22 wins. I mean, how good, again, I've asked this a few times with people, but, a few months earlier, your life's flipped upside down, literally, where you have to move and you don't have a job. And then things like this work out where, again, you join a program that, like you mentioned, has had tons of success and people come through it. How good was that for you to see at that point?
Yeah, it was so good. I mean, in so many ways, right? From a personal standpoint, it was like, okay, like when adversity hits, I know that we're going to get through it. It was a good lesson for me just to just stay faithful, stay focused, stay locked in, and, things work out. We feel at times where we might be at the end of our rope, or like, man, I don't know, I don't see the path, but like there's a plan. And so you just got to kind of put your head down and stick through it. So I learned that lesson. Obviously through the coaching and the basketball, man, I'm moving up levels. I'm seeing things a different way. And the Crossroads League in Indiana, my goodness, like you might as well put them in a Division I conference. All
Right.
Those teams from top to bottom are good, and they can compete at that level. And so I'm seeing athleticism I've never seen. I'm seeing coaching I've never seen. I'm seeing adjustments I've never seen, and just, again, soaking it all up, just being a part of it, getting to dive straight in at a small college to do everything right. So, man, I grew so much as a coach that 1 year, probably more than I did any other place, just because it was a whirlwind of knowledge and a whirlwind of just seeing things at a different level. So yeah, grew a ton.
How much of that helped you connect the dots then to get in the head job the next year at Lancaster Bible?
Yeah, I mean,
obviously having a great experience that way and being a part of a great program, and, obviously you'd been working and had some experience, but, the process of getting that job, what was that all like?
Yeah, so we connected. I had one of my one of my mentor's sons went to LBC, to Lancaster. So I had a little bit of a connection. He kind of put me in touch with the AD. We had some good initial phone calls and discussions. Ultimately, they ended up flying us out there to do in-person interviews, and, really just connected with everybody. I think it was a great fit. I think we had the same ideas of how we wanted to do things, same philosophies. And, I do remember in the interview, or I don't know if it was the interview process or if it was later on after I had gotten that job, but I do remember my AD saying, if you hadn't gone to Bethel for that 1 year, I don't know if you would have gotten this job. And again, it kind of just shows you the importance of where you're at. Like sometimes those positions, like you might take a job for a year, but if you're around good people and a recognizable program, it can help you get a head coaching job, or it can help you get the next job. So that was kind of eye-opening for me, but went through that season, and, we had a great season up until the end, and had some injuries. The wheels kind of fell off, and it was a really tough finish to other than that, a great season.
So leaving there and going to Stetson, was that the opportunity just to be Division I and work for Coach Jones and things like that? Or how did that all kind of come about with you moving down to Florida?
Yeah, it was a few things. I don't think things ended too well at LBC. There was just a couple things going on. I had some players on my team with relationships to some of the administration, playing time, different things like that. I think just I didn't feel that connection, but had the opportunity to go down there to Stetson. And again, we moved down there, and it was always a dream of mine to coach Division I. Always was looking for an opportunity to get my foot in the door, right? Like, I think every year prior to that, I'm writing letters, I'm applying for jobs, I'm, trying to get something, and it was letter after rejection letter, like, sorry, we have that position filled. So when I had that opportunity to get down to Stetson, and obviously Coach Jones, 2 national championships at Florida under Billy Donovan, and has coached so many first-round draft picks in the NBA and just NBA All-Stars, a knowledgeable guy. And one of the other assistants on staff, Brendan Sir, won 2 world championships with the Detroit Pistons, and
the Chuck Daly days, right?
Yeah, he was, Chuck Daly's right-hand man, and just a coaching legend. Still to this day, just impacting coaches like crazy. And when I just, I knew if I could get my foot in the door there, I would be around some great people and just, kind of become become part of a coaching tree that I could learn a ton from and just grow with. So we made the leap and went down to Florida and, started out taking the video coordinator position and, was there for 4 years.
So where does your growth kind of started in terms of now, obviously you've done leadership speaking, the book, Win 1-1, just being kind of giving back to people and educating and helping people grow and things like that. Like I said, the book was super easy to read, loved reading it, honestly, in terms of just how simple and simplistic and the concepts that were in there. Like, where did that all kind of start for you? Was that something years ago that was kind of in the back of your head, or is that more of a more recent thing?
Yeah, I think, when I was in college, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Alan Stein. Alan Stein he's a speaker and used to be a basketball trainer. But I think back then he had put out a challenge of read 50 books in a year. And I was like, all right, like I'm sitting in my dorm room. I'm trying to learn and grow. So I took up the challenge and I read 50 books that year. And it was one of those things where I started seeing, man, this helps me. I'm learning things. I have these coaches or leaders or people who have been there, done that. And I can learn from their failures. I can learn from their successes. And I was seeing how I could apply that to coaching. And so every year for the next probably 5 or 6 years, I read 50 books a year. And ever since then, I developed a love for books and I developed a love for leadership. And at that time, it was just me being a recipient, right? Like I was soaking it in, I was growing, and it was helping me be a better dad, a better husband, a better coach. And then I think I started realizing like, man, the older I got, I'm the person now who has to be that for other people. Like I've had those people for me, but I got to be that for other people. And so it was always a dream of mine to write a book. I loved making an impact on people and influencing people. And so I had tried several times and never finished my books, but this one just, it came to me and it flowed as we were writing it and, kind of took off from there.
Yeah, no, I love, like I said, the points you have in there, just even reminders of things like, you don't win everything at once and, stacking good days and, different things that you hear. But again, just reaffirming some things and some of the questions you asked in there too, like what systems keep you grounded in your excellence, or what are your routines that are there when the days when you're like, I really don't feel like doing this, right? Well, what's that thing that keeps you going, that keeps things? So just those constant reminders of things I think are always great because again, right, nobody's perfect. Hopefully everybody that's, listening to podcasts, reading books, attending conferences is trying to better themselves. But at times, right, like it's easy to just be like, oh, I'm going to take a week off. I'm going to take a month off, take a year off. I'll get to that another time. And so it's just like, what are those things that are in your mind of like, I need to do this to kind of stay up on things. So, I love that. And then, what have you done for leadership speaking? Has it just been kind of high school teams or college teams or kind of whoever's out there, even businesses and things like that too?
Yeah, a lot of it's been coaches and teams, in athletic departments. I'd like to get out to do more with businesses, but kind of the most applicable place and easiest place is with those teams and players and stuff. And, that concept of win 1-1 is win every moment one day at a time. And like how many times in our programs, right? Like you said, it's just you make a mistake. How do you respond to it? We all know these things because everybody talks about them and we know the coaching lingo and the terminology.
Coach speak, yeah.
Yeah, but like you said, right, you gotta have some systems and you gotta have a process that you work through. And sometimes that's just as simple as recognition, right? Like recognizing what's going on and then maybe having a word or two that you talk about or a common shared language with your team that when this happens, this is how we refocus. And I think just being able to get in front of those teams and these coaches to help them kind of work through and talk through some of that stuff has been awesome, right? Because it's simple. It's nothing that we haven't heard before. It's nothing that is just this earth-shattering idea. But, I think when we really focus and stay consistent with our process and with our system, like that's where the true change happens. So, I may hear my coach saying next play, but if I don't know what it means or I don't know how to reset quickly and move on, like if I don't have that process in my mind, like it doesn't matter. Like my coach can say that all day, but it's truly a skill that you have to learn. And, I think when athletes and coaches become knowledgeable about how to teach it, not just what to say, that's where the true magic happens. And you can start finding that significance and success.
No, I agree. I love those thoughts. I guess where can people follow you at in terms of getting your book or just leadership stuff, whether that's on Twitter or LinkedIn or even your website or things like that? Where can people follow you at?
Yeah, so anywhere on social media, my handle's Coach Wingreen. So X, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever, at Coach Wingreen. Like to post a lot of leadership content and obviously about our program. Try and do a lot of basketball stuff on there as well. Or you can visit the website, coachwingreen.com. That has a lot of information about the books and the frameworks that I use and speaking opportunities. Just again, not trying to sell anything, just trying to say, hey, if this can help your team and if this can impact your program, I would love to be a part of that. And I'm also coming out with a new book, getting ready to release here later this fall. And so it's kind of cool having, Win 1 is very focused on the process and the athlete and just that mindset. And my next book, Return the Cart, is more about, the small choices and how do we build a culture and the things we walk past and kind of how do we navigate that situation. So yeah, would love to connect with any listeners, anybody who's, whether it's questions about coaching or leadership or, people who have been through, like the fired coaches, right? Man, it's something that happens to almost all of us, but how we respond to it's so important. So definitely love to connect with anyone out there.
That's awesome, Andrew. Yeah, look forward to seeing your next book. And yes, a PSA to people, please return your carts. Though there is a spot for those things. So I appreciate you joining, man. And obviously we'll get your book notes here in the next newsletter. And just look forward to kind of following you, and best of luck at Florida down there with what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. And again, love the Packers stuff in the background. So we got football season starting up. So go Pack, go.
Amen.